back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel today. We are going to jump into today's video and talk about mostly the don'ts on what you should not do for driving a manual transmission. And these are little things that actually lots of manual transmission drivers will actually do on a day-to-day basis. They're very convenient, but they actually can cause a lot of harm to the vehicle. So let's go ahead and jump into the very first one. Now, one of the very first things that a lot of people do that is actually a major mistake is leaving their foot to rest on the clutch pedal. Now, that's a lot of times if you drive an automatic normally, there's kind of an extra space where that third pedal is, and unfortunately it's kind of crowded by the clutch pedal when you actually drive a stick. So it can be very, very easy for you to want to actually just rest your foot on there. Unfortunately, what can happen is if you're not paying attention and you're actually applying more force than you're expecting to, or just that you realize that you are, you can actually be adding a small bit of force that is starting to let your clutch engage and disengage, which adds tons and tons of wear to the clutch. And so, especially while you're moving, you never want to be, that's almost like adding a little bit of the clutch slipping at usually a much higher RPM that it's designed to handle. So don't do that. That's one of those bad habits that's very easy to do. You don't have to just be a novice driver to make that mistake, but at the same time, it's something you want to avoid. Now, the second thing that a lot of people actually do when driving sticks, and I gotta say, it's very easy for me to find myself doing this, is to rest your hand on the shift knob. See, what that does is it just allows for your selector fork to actually come into contact with your rotating collar. And what will happen is over time, that causes friction and will wear down the components. That selector fork is designed to be housed so that it is engaged. So as I let off and there's no friction going, I can switch gears. If you're actually giving weight onto your knob, then it's actually causing that friction to build up as you're moving. You may not notice it, but again, it's just added wear and tear to the shift knob, to your selector fork, which is a very important component. So again, one of those very simple things, and again guys, it's just like the foot. It's very easy to find yourself resting. Find a different place. Get yourself out of the habit of doing that. Or if you're a newbie and you're kind of watching this video, getting some ideas on how not to drive a manual transmission, things you should not do, find a resting place. Like right here, I can even rest it on the top of my emergency brake. And so that's what kind of works for me. But again, I catch myself, it's very easy to want to just set your hand. Even if you think lightly, over time you stop thinking about it and you'll start putting more and more pressure. And it also, keeps you from ever accidentally like having your hand there. And if you brake really quick, pushing yourself out of gear when you haven't even disengaged your clutch. So, just one of those things that is very simple to do, but you really want to keep yourself from doing. Now, the third don't is definitely directed towards newbie drivers because it is something that is so easy to do. And as you're learning to drive a manual, changing gears can be daunting, especially your starts. It's so easy to kill a vehicle, or I should say a manual transmission, especially as you're learning. Installing a vehicle at a stop, especially with traffic around, is one of those just, your stomach drops, your heart just races, and it's so easy to do. So a lot of times people will actually leave it in first gear at a red light. They don't want to have to disengage the clutch, re-engage it, put it in first and go. They don't want to have to mess with that. So they will do kind of the short way around that, and they will just leave it in first and easily feather the gas as they come off. But actually leaving your clutch depressed the whole time, especially if you're at a light that lasts a long time, is a ton of extra wear on your throwout bearing. It's not something that you want to do. There's a lot of people that say, well, it's really not that much stress, but it's one of those things that really you should get in the habit, and it will actually make you a better driver if you become more confident and don't feel like you can't disengage and then come out of first. Leave it in neutral, disengage, leave it in neutral, sit at the stoplight, and then as green comes up, put it in first. A lot of people think, well, it takes me too long to press down the clutch, put it in first, then get rolling, and automatic, they're just ready to go. But guess what? Over time, especially as you build that confidence, you'll learn where that bite point is. You'll get very good at first gear takeoffs. So, don't worry about that. It is a little daunting at first, especially for newbies. But guys, don't forget, everybody started somewhere. And yes, you might get honked at. Yes, you might make a fool of yourself. But don't forget, everybody started somewhere, everybody learned at some point, and everybody has been through it. And I certainly have done it multiple times. But guess what? It doesn't take away from the enjoyment. I learned how to drive manuals younger. I've learned how to drive this vehicle. And guys, it's so much fun. I highly recommend a manual. Don't let those things scare away from you. See, I'm at a stoplight right now, and I'm actually, in neutral. I don't have the, holding the clutch down. When I first was learning to drive vehicles, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, the very last and fourth kind of don't that I have on my list is do not use your first gear, kind of your bite point, to hold yourself on an incline. Always take it out of gear and use your emergency brake or whatever your main brake system is. Sometimes they're electronic now. The new C7 Corvette actually has that. But do not use that bite point to hold you in place. A lot of automatics with, their ability to hold you in place in their main first gear is fine. It's designed to be able to do that. But a manual transmission, that's not something you really want to do. You want to make sure that you actually take it out of first and put your emergency brake on. Sometimes when you're getting up a hill, you have to do that, but it's a lot of wear on the clutch. So make sure you kind of take that into account as you're driving around. And especially if you're getting kind of used to manuals for the first time, make sure you stay away from tons of inclines. That's a very tough point, and as you build your confidence, you'll be a lot better off on a lot of strong inclines or really, high point inclines. Now, the final point that I'm actually going to make is something that I've actually heard people believe that they cannot do, and that is missing gears, going from first to fourth. They're going from second to fourth, or actually going down from fourth to second. Skipping gears. Is it something you can do or can't do? And it's something you actually can do. You just have to do it effectively. You would never want to be at highway speed and go from fifth down to first, because obviously it's going to be past your red line. You could really do major catastrophic harm to your vehicle's engine. But it's okay if you're kind of trotting along in fifth gear to low RPM, and if you actually rev match and drop all the way down to second because you can, that's okay. You just have to work on your rev matching, and you have to make sure that the gear can handle the speed that you are at without being past red line. Now, one caveat that I want to make is mine actually has the lockout, 1 to 4 lockout. Not everybody will be aware of what this feature is, but it's actually to improve gas mileage, which is kind of crazy. I mean, this is a Corvette after all. I'm not really worried about gas mileage, but at the same time, it's a feature that a lot of cars have, and that is I get a light that gives me green when I am in first, taking from a slow takeoff. I will get a 1-4 telling me that it's locked out second and third, and I need to shift straight to fourth. It actually says in the manual, when this light is on, you want to shift to fourth. You don't want to shift into another gear. It actually says it could cause harm to the transmission. So I always either shift into fourth, or I just make sure I rev past, I think it's like 2,500 RPMs, and then that light will go away and I'm free to shift into second. I don't have to do an aggressive launch. I just can't shift into second at a super low RPM if I've taken a kind of a slow takeoff. Guys, I hope you guys found a lot of those, tips and tricks helpful, ways to, make yourself a better manual transmission driver. It really isn't that bad. And again, I highly recommend you guys, if you're not a manual transmission driver, give it a shot. You're going to know someone that has a manual transmission, and I guarantee, as long as they don't have a nice sports car as your first kind of trial, they're going to let you drive it. They were there at one point, and that enjoyment that you get from being just engaged into the vehicle is something that you just can't get anywhere else with a different type of transmission. Guys, I really hope you found this informative. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tons of new video and content coming up. I appreciate all the support. We're growing. I'm really enjoying it. It's great conversing with you all. So you all take care, and I will see you tomorrow.